So when Taylor was born, the Victorian government had a newborn hearing screening program. So we knew that when she was 1 or 2 days old, the nurse would come to test her hearing. So she had the test and the nurse put out her hand and I could lip read her saying, "Congratulations." Mel and I looked at each other and we weren't too sure what that meant. Is she saying, "Congratulations, she's deaf like us?" Or she's saying, "Congratulations, your daughter's hearing"? So we just wanted to clarify. And then she said, "No, your daughter can hear." And that really impacted us because we didn't really care about the result itself, but we thought about what would happen for those parents who get a diagnosis that their child is deaf. Would the nurse say, "Oh, I'm sorry that your child is deaf"? It's that negative perspective. That really shows how the medical model really influences our society rather than the cultural and linguistic model. It's immediately, do you pass or do you fail? It's not about deafness and hearing and whether people have other language options.
Taylor and Nate, their first language was AUSLAN, which is our primary language. So they learnt to sign, and actually they could learn to sign before they could speak anyway, so that made things easier.
We did consider how they'd be able to develop both languages at the same time, but then we ultimately made a decision to just use AUSLAN in the home, and then naturally as they went to childcare or they played with their cousins or neighbours, their English would just improve and excel, and now they're fluent in both languages.
So I think it's great to know 2 different languages because at school we can use English and stuff, and at home we can communicate a different way, like we can use signing, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah. And we're the only ones in the school that our parents are deaf.
Yes, so when we read to our children, we sometimes would be in AUSLAN grammar and syntax, and then sometimes we'd sign word by word to make sure that it follows the English syntax and structure.
I think technology is really, it's made a big difference in our lives as parents. So this house is actually set up in a way that we don't have to rely on our kids. So we have a front doorbell that has visual alerts and alarms, as well as a fire alarm and a baby crying alarm. So we did have that back in the day, and we'd also have one with a camera so we could check in and see if the crying was anything to worry about.
Taylor and Nate's school previously had Italian being taught as a second language, but then the teachers decide to send a vote out to the parents to choose whether or not they change over to a different language to be taught. And the option was to still teach Italian or Chinese or AUSLAN, and there was a high percentage of votes leaning towards AUSLAN, and we felt really proud about that because that meant we could communicate with our kids' friends and we weren't seen as parents with a disability. We were seen as part of the community.
I think we're really proud that our children have our identity, language and culture ingrained within them, and it'll be there forever. They show the right attitude, they're not ashamed, they're not, really they just love the language, and they're very visual communicators. They enjoy being among deaf people, going to deaf events and being part of that world, and at the same time they really enjoy their hearing world. So there's a good balance there. Nate and I were watching football recently on TV, and the captions sometimes blocked the ball, so we agreed that we'd turn off the captions. So I switched them off, and then at the same time, Nate turned the volume down to 0. I looked over at him and said, "But now you can't understand." And he said, "Well, now we're equal." So we're watching the football without sound or captions. And that really impacted on me because I realised he understood what it meant to be deaf and he wanted us to have the same experience. So that was really beautiful.
You didn't tell me that.
It was last week.
Oh, lovely.